Guys, welcome to a real classic film review of 1966's Fantastic Voyage, a film that 2 years before Kubrick took cinemas on a space odyssey, Richard Fleischer took audiences on a very different but equally exotic voyage, a fantastic voyage, if you will. 1966's Fantastic Voyage featured a group of scientists having to be miniaturized in order to travel into the body of a comatose scientist to save his life. Now, along the way, they have to deal with sabotage, the human body's natural defences, and they race against time through various areas of their host. Now, once you get over the obviously ropey science of a shrinking ray and the many physics-related liberties the plot takes, it all starts to feel almost plausible. And if the still nifty internal organ photography doesn't impress, we also get a 25-year-old Raquel Welch here just on the cusp of that 1 million years BC poster, making her the sex symbol of the latter 60s and 70s. Let's take a look.
Inject.
So 1966's Fantastic Voyage sees a foreign scientist who's defecting to America barely survive an assassination attempt, suffering a life-threatening blood clot in his brain. Now, the scientist must be saved at all costs, so the government employs its top-secret miniaturization technology, and using this, they'll assemble a team and a sub and shrink them to sub-microscopic size, inject them into the scientist's body and perform the surgery from the inside using a laser rifle to cut a blood clot, like you do. But there's a catch, of course. The miniaturization procedure only lasts for 1 hour, so it becomes a race against time before the team and the submarine start to grow again and things get really messy. Now, this is still one of my favourite early science fiction movies, I think, maybe because it's based on the actual science of the human body, or at least as much as it can be when you have miniaturized people floating around in it. The, at the time, groundbreaking visual effects still impress in a few instances, although let's not pretend that the majority of it is now seriously dated, something I think adds to its charm in a way. It's well over 50 years old at this point, and the whole miniaturization thing wasn't totally new in movies, one of the more famous instances being 1957's The Incredible Shrinking Man. So before we get into the details, let's take a peek at our heroic miniature team. A surgical team consisting of Arthur Kennedy and his lovely assistant, Cora, played by Raquel Welch, with William Redfield piloting the miniature ship Proteus, shady scientist Donald Pleasance, and the fact that we have Stephen Boyd as CIA agent Grant on board providing security gives a hint at how things may go down.
Until after we refuel.
I can't imagine how it possibly could have happened. I distinctly remember fastening it down.
Must have been jarred loose during the whirlpool.
And there wouldn't be much drama or fun if one of those people wasn't a potential saboteur working for the bad guys, and I won't spoil it for you, but you shouldn't have too much trouble working out who that is.
We got to get out of here now. It's sheer suicide for all of us. I'm not going to let him operate.
Dr. Michaels, you're in no condition to make any decision.
Duval, you're not going to go through with this. I absolutely forbid it. I won't allow you or anyone else to leave this ship.
I'm going to do all I can to save Benish.
Now, I'm not as up on my internal biology as I'd like to be, but the fact that many scientists are thanked in the film's final credits suggests the whole thing is grounded in at least some actual science. But what I love about Fantastic Voyage is how 60s it is. The special effects definitely lean towards the psychedelic. The bloodstream is basically a lava lamp. Much of the organs and vessels, etc., are coloured in jazzy pastels. And the crew frequently stop to marvel at their surroundings, quoting hazy 60s poetry.
Yet all the suns that light the corridors of the universe shine dim before the blazing of a single thought.
Proclaiming in incandescent glory the myriad mind of man.
Very poetic, gentlemen. Let me know when we pass the soul.
Now, I can only imagine that inside the human body it'd be pretty dark. But here, it's presented as pretty much a tropical ocean-style environment with fish and other sea creatures replaced with blood cells, antibodies and proteins, etc. I mean, it makes for spectacular scenery, of course, as the ship and its crew navigate through the heart and lungs on their way to the brain. Now, the script here essentially requires the crew to jump from one problem to the next in a race against time, with these problems ranging from navigating a super sensitive ear canal, can the operating theatre outside stay quiet for long enough? Of course it can't. if you're wondering what happens when Raquel Welch is attacked by some of those little white crusty antibodies, well, that's right. It's every red-blooded crewmate's job to get their hands in and tear them off her tight white jumpsuit. So one of the cool things about Fantastic Voyage is it's a real-time adventure. The crew have 60 minutes to perform the procedure, and once they get inside the body, there's exactly an hour's runtime left in the film. Now, the zany inner space of the body is nicely balanced by the cold clinical environment of the laboratory and the operating room. I love the mostly silent scene where the submarine shrunk down. The tension throughout the launch procedure finally broken once the claustrophobic Donald Pleasance has his first freak out of the mission.
I can't breathe.
Dr. Michaels.
I can't breathe.
Dr. Michaels!
I've got to get out.
It's too late for that. Now we must go on.
Now, I'm also a big fan of the ship used here, the Proteus, which I'm sure I read was designed by the same guys behind the Nautilus in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Again, it's so 60s, it's hilarious with its little bubble dome on top, and I'm not sure you design a ship with edges that sharp to be injected into a human body, but either way, it's a brilliant bit of Jetson-style design. Now, director Richard Fleischer, who'd already made 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954 and would go on to make 1967's Dr. Dolittle and 1973's Soylent Green, was no stranger to wrangling a visual effects heavy movie, and the fact he was a pre-med student back in the day probably didn't hinder him either. So does the whole thing look like an original Star Trek episode? Yeah. Should the crew have saved a lot of time and entered through the same tear duct they emerged from? Probably. And would their leftover equipment revert back to full size and kill the patient? Yeah, probably. But you can't let trivialities like that detract you from what is essentially a great fusion of 20,000 Leagues and Journey to the Centre of the Earth. Now, a big budget remake's been on and off the cards for years now, which with modern tech I'm sure could be jaw-dropping. But this is one of those cases where you surely can't beat the charm of the original. Go check it out.